The vanishing that started it all. Well, that's right. The year is 2025, and for the first time in over 4 centuries, scientists believe they have finally cracked the most haunting mystery in American history: the disappearance of the Roanoke Colony. For generations, it's been an enigma that haunted classrooms, history books, and campfire stories alike. Ever wondered where you really come from? Not the stories, but the science. On this channel, we decode real DNA, uncover lost ancestries, and bring ancient genomes to life through cinematic storytelling. If that excites you, subscribe for weekly insights. Like the video to support science-based history, and drop a comment. Your questions help guide what we explore next. 115 men, women, and children, gone without a trace. No graves, no bodies, no evidence of struggle. Just one haunting clue carved into wood, a single word: Croatoan. For centuries, that word stood as both a riddle and a tombstone. What happened to those settlers who dreamed of a new world but were instead swallowed by it? Were they slaughtered by hostile tribes, consumed by famine, or lost to the wilderness? Or was the truth something even darker? Something the earth itself had hidden? It all began in the blistering summer of 1587, when 3 English ships cut through the waters of the Atlantic and dropped anchor along the wild, untamed coastline of what we now call North Carolina. This wasn't a group of adventurers or mercenaries. These were families, farmers, craftsmen, mothers carrying infants. They came not to conquer, but to begin. Their leader was John White, an artist, a mapmaker, and a man whose optimism sometimes bordered on delusion. Alongside him was his daughter, Eleanor, and her newborn baby, Virginia Dare, the first English child ever born on American soil. To England, her birth was a symbol of triumph, proof that the empire could take root in the New World. But Roanoke was no paradise. The settlers faced relentless drought, dwindling food, and fragile relations with native tribes who viewed them with a weary eye. Still, they built, they planted, they prayed, and they endured. For a time, it seemed as though hope might survive on that patch of pine and sand. Then, supplies began to run dangerously low. Desperate, John White sailed back to England, promising to return in a few months. But fate had other plans. War erupted with Spain. Every English ship was seized for the Armada. White's pleas fell on deaf ears, and the months stretched into years. When he finally returned in August of 1590, the world he had built was gone. The fort stood eerily intact. Tools lay neatly stacked, as if waiting for hands that would never return. But there were no settlers, no smoke from fires, no footprints in the sand. Only silence, and that single word carved into a wooden post: Croatoan. No distress symbol, no sign of violence, no graves. Just the word, an echo of life that had already slipped away. White's logbook recorded it all: his confusion, his dread, and the storm that prevented him from searching the nearby Croatoan island, the place that word might have pointed to. He never made it there. The storm drove him back to England, broken and hollow. He would never see his daughter or granddaughter again. And so, the story became legend, America's first ghost story. But in 2025, everything changed. A discovery was made deep in the Carolina soil that didn't just rewrite the story, it reanimated it. And what scientists uncovered wasn't simply fascinating, it was terrifying. Because what they found suggested that the colonists of Roanoke didn't vanish. They evolved. They survived. And they left behind a secret no one was ever supposed to find. Echoes beneath the soil. It began with a sound, not a voice, not a whisper, but a pulse echoing through the ground. In January of 2025, a small team of archaeologists from the First Colony Foundation returned to the Carolina mainland to conduct what they believed would be a routine subsurface radar survey. The site was unremarkable, a quiet stretch of wilderness near the Croatoan River just west of the original Roanoke settlement. But beneath the layers of soil and root, something was waiting. The radar scans revealed faint geometric patterns, rectangular outlines, corners and post holes buried under centuries of sediment. At first, they thought it was a natural formation, perhaps tree roots or erosion patterns. But when they overlaid the grid onto John White's 16th century map, the same one that had once hidden a fort under a patch of paint, the shapes aligned perfectly. The coordinates matched the mysterious symbol concealed on White's map, the same hidden square that had puzzled historians since its discovery in 2012. For years, it had been dismissed as coincidence. But now, in 2025, new technology had peeled back the Earth's skin and shown what no one had ever seen before. It wasn't coincidence. It was architecture. When the team broke ground, what they uncovered felt impossible. The remains of wooden posts, preserved by clay and water. Fragments of pottery unmistakably English, green-glazed earthenware from Surrey and Hampshire. But that wasn't the shocking part. Embedded in the clay was a single rusted buckle, bronze, small, delicate, of the exact style used on women's shoes in the late 1500s. It shouldn't have been there. Roanoke's earlier expeditions were entirely male. This could have only belonged to one of the settlers from the 1587 colony, the group that had vanished. Days later, the same site yielded more artifacts. A fragment of slate engraved faintly with letters that resembled English script, the partial outline of an E. It was fragile, like the ghost of a message never sent. The team handled it with trembling gloves. And then came the discovery that changed everything. Less than 6 feet beneath the surface, buried near what appeared to be the remains of a shallow wooden structure, they found human remains. Small, fragile, but intact. The burial was deliberate. The skeleton had been laid facing east, head to the west, in the Christian tradition of resurrection. No grave goods, no cross, no coffin, just careful placement as if someone had wanted her to rest peacefully.
At first, they assumed it was Native American, perhaps part of a later tribe that had settled the region, but the DNA results would silence that assumption forever. In a sterile lab in Raleigh, mitochondrial DNA extracted from the bone told a story that science could barely believe. The woman was of unmistakably European descent, her genetic markers aligning not with later Jamestown settlers, but with a lineage traced directly to southern England in the 1500s. And the carbon dating? Between 1580 and 1595. It was as if history itself had paused for a breath, 4 centuries of silence cracked open by a single grave. For the first time, scientists could say it out loud without fear of ridicule. The lost colony had lived on. But what was even more disturbing, what chilled the team to the bone, was that this woman hadn't died in the coastal region of Roanoke Island. She had died 50 miles inland, far from the beach, far from salvation, far from being found. If she was there, then others must have been too. The data was irrefutable. The Roanoke settlers hadn't simply vanished, they had moved. And the question that began to terrify everyone involved wasn't where they went, but why? What drove them into the deep interior, into the forests that no English foot had ever walked? As the team dug deeper, both literally and metaphorically, the soil began to give up its secrets. Clay shards from 2 separate sites suggested something unprecedented, 2 distinct settlement styles, one structured and defensive, with evidence of palisade posts and storage pits, the other more scattered, smaller hearths, mixed pottery and animal bones, consistent with hunting and foraging rather than farming. This wasn't a camp, it was a migration. Historians had speculated for decades that the colonists may have split, some heading southeast toward Croatoan Island, others venturing inland to escape drought, starvation, or danger. But until now, it had all been theory. In 2025, the dirt began to whisper confirmation. One colony, two fates. The Roanoke settlers didn't die all at once, they fractured. Some found refuge among the friendly Croatoan tribe, blending cultures and bloodlines. Others fled inland, building quiet enclaves that would be swallowed by forest and forgotten by history. But as the scientists studied the soil samples, something else emerged, something darker. Traces of elevated copper, arsenic, and lead in the sediment suggested exposure to contaminated water or food supplies. The colonists hadn't just been starving, they had been poisoned. Not deliberately, at least not by any human hand, but by the very land they had tried to tame. Roanoke had been cursed not by myth, but by chemistry. The rivers, tainted by natural mineral runoff, carried toxins from the upper swamps. The crops failed, the settlers grew weak, delirious, desperate. And that desperation, scientists believe, was the spark. The one that split the colony apart. Half fled toward the coast, hoping to reach friendly tribes. Half journeyed inland, following the rivers that were slowly killing them. And somewhere in that vast wilderness, history simply lost track. Until now. The map that lied. For centuries, John White's map of the Carolina coast was seen as nothing more than a beautifully drawn artifact, ink, parchment, and legend. But the truth was hiding beneath its surface all along. When conservators at the British Museum re-examined White's map in 2012, they noticed something unusual. A faint patch, a small irregular piece of paper glued over the original parchment near the Chowan River. At the time, it seemed harmless. A repair, maybe. A simple correction by a 16th century hand. But when ultraviolet light passed through that patch, the image that glowed underneath would rewrite the map and history. There, hidden beneath layers of pigment and time, was a small blue and red symbol, a perfect square marked by a star. It was no mistake. It was a message. Historians quickly realized that the symbol's coordinates aligned with an inland location, not on the coast, but 50 miles west of Roanoke Island, deep within what was once native territory. It was a strange choice for a fort, but White had drawn it deliberately. Some began to suspect that he had hidden the fort's location intentionally, perhaps as a coded signal visible only to those who knew what to look for. After all, if the map had fallen into Spanish hands, the colony's secret refuge would have been revealed. For years, the hidden fort theory remained just that, a theory, until 2025. Using new satellite-based multispectral imaging, archaeologists overlaid White's original map, corrected for 16th century magnetic drift, onto modern topography. The results were eerie. The hidden symbol didn't just correspond to an arbitrary patch of wilderness, it matched exactly with the 2025 excavation site, the same one where the woman's remains were found. The fort had been real. It had been there the entire time. But that discovery led to another, more disturbing question. If White had hidden the fort's location under the map's surface, what else had he hidden? That's when the digital analysis team noticed something that human eyes had always missed. On the right-hand side of the map, near the coastline, faint brushstrokes that once seemed decorative, gentle waves, stylized trees, resolved under high-contrast scanning into something else entirely. Letters. Barely visible, written in faded ochre ink, Crow. It wasn't the full Croatoan carved into the tree. It was earlier, more deliberate, almost as if White had known before he even left England that his colony would not remain on Roanoke. Some experts speculated it was a prearranged signal, a rendezvous point. Others believed it was a desperate warning. But when forensic analysts compared the ink composition of those faint letters to the rest of the map, they found something impossible.
The crow marking had been written after the rest of the map was completed, years later, by a different hand. The implication was staggering. Someone had returned to that map long after the colony vanished and added the clue. Whoever it was, they had known something the rest of the world didn't. Historians began to suspect a cover-up, not by the modern world, but by the very men who recorded the colony's history. When John White returned to England after finding his settlement deserted in 1590, he told the Crown that the colonists had removed to Croatoan, but he never went there. He never even tried. His excuse was weather, storms, bad luck. But modern researchers found letters written by White's contemporaries, notes never meant for public eyes, suggesting something else, that White had been ordered not to go back. By 2025, historians were piecing together fragments of correspondence from London's archives. They spoke of a strategic withdrawal, of unreliable alliances, and of circumstances not suitable for royal attention. It was coded, careful, diplomatic, the kind of language used when men in power wanted the truth to disappear quietly. It suggested that the English crown may have known the colony's fate and chosen to bury it. If true, it would mean the mystery of Roanoke wasn't just about a vanished settlement. It was about a secret the crown couldn't afford to reveal. Because the colony hadn't simply vanished by nature or native hand. It had been abandoned intentionally. And the faint crow on that map, it wasn't a message from the lost settlers to those who found them. It was a message from the crown to history itself. Erase them. But as the 2025 investigations continued, another discovery emerged. One that suggested not everyone had obeyed that command. One of the archaeologists, working late into the night, noticed something strange on the underside of a pottery fragment recovered from the inland site, a faint symbol scratched into the clay before it had been fired, a symbol no one recognized at first glance, a triangle enclosing a circle with a line bisecting both. When compared to symbols in early colonial records, it matched a secret cipher used by Elizabethan navigators to mark safe houses and coded locations. It wasn't random, it was deliberate, and it pointed to one final chilling possibility, that the Roanoke settlers had built not just one fort, but several. Small, hidden outposts scattered across the interior, connected by symbols only they could understand. Each one a whisper of survival or a warning. The survivors that time forgot. For centuries, the name Roanoke meant one thing: disappearance. A riddle carved into a tree, a settlement swallowed by time. But in 2025, the truth began to whisper through blood. Deep in the archives of North Carolina State University, geneticists compared mitochondrial DNA samples from the remains discovered inland with volunteer DNA from families whose ancestry stretched back through the Carolinas. The results stunned everyone. A handful of families, quiet, ordinary people who'd lived on the same land for generations, carried rare genetic markers identical to the woman buried near the hidden fort. They weren't random matches, they were descendants. Through unbroken maternal lines, passed silently from mother to daughter, the lost colony had endured, not in books or ruins, but in living memory, carried in blood. And when those families were told the news, some wept. One woman, her great-grandmother born near the Croatoan River, said she always wondered why her family's oral stories mentioned the English lady who came from the sea. It wasn't just legend. It was history resurfacing after 400 years of silence. The lost colony hadn't perished in the wilderness. They had adapted, survived, intermarried with tribes that gave them refuge, the Croatoan, the Roanoke, the Lumbee. Together, they built something the English crown never recorded, a new people, a new nation born of two worlds. And as the DNA evidence spread across academic circles, something remarkable happened. For the first time, historians, archaeologists, and descendants stood on the same soil, looking at the same forest, knowing they were standing on the graves and the legacy of the first forgotten Americans. The legend of Roanoke had always been told as a story of loss, but maybe it was never about disappearance. Maybe it was about transformation. When the camera pans across the Carolina coast today, the waves still crash against Roanoke Island as they did in 1587. The trees still sway where the colonists once built their homes. But somewhere, deep beneath the moss and the quiet, the earth remembers. Every artifact, every letter, every name carved into wood, all of it was never lost. It was waiting. Waiting for the world to stop searching for a vanishing act and start listening to what the past was really saying. They didn't vanish. They became us. The blood of the lost colony still flows in every family that calls this land home, in every story passed from parent to child, in every echo of English words whispered through native tongues. The mystery is no longer what happened to them. The real question now is, what have we forgotten about ourselves? Because the lost colony was never lost. It simply refused to die. And as the screen fades to black, the last image lingers. A single tree trunk in the forest, carved centuries ago. The letters almost erased by time. Crow, faint, but still there. A final message not of despair, but of endurance. The colony wasn't lost. It was found, right where it had always been, in the heartbeat of history, and in the living, breathing descendants who still walk among us today.